March the 1st, 2026. Guys, we got a lot going on, and one thing that I want to talk about in this video is the implications here at home. Now, there are worldwide implications of what's going on with Iran and the U.S. and Israel now. Main thing internationally is that the Straits of Hormuz are still blocked. And we talked about 20% of the world's oil comes through that, but about 80% of that goes to China. Japan is almost completely dependent on it. And other Asia, really, that's that Asian route that comes through there. About 80% of that oil is, again, destined for Asia. So what happens when that stops? Well, everyone has to go to their strategic oil reserves, just like here in the U.S. Now, we got some updates. Also, you got to think about this. Every nation almost has a strategic oil reserve. We do, Japan does, China does, India does, and some nations are more dependent on that because they don't have the supplies or the necessary means to use their oil that they have. But on the blockade, it says the IRGC, that's the Iranian Guard, has issued VHF radio transmissions to vessels saying no ship is allowed to pass, and that's been going on for a couple of days. There's been a few incidences. A couple of ships went black and snuck through. The U.S. tried to get one through, but some Iranian gunboats surrounded it. But here comes a U.S. destroyer and escorts that tanker out of harm's way. But again, that is a very temporary solution compared to what is going on. So you've got a problem with Europe having to reroute oil and gas, natural gas, things like that. When you're dealing with natural gas, you know it's a main ingredient in worldwide fertilizer. What I'm getting at here is I'm already looking at the projected opening for Wall Street. The price of oil has went up $2 since this started Saturday. That's per barrel. That's not that bad yet, but people are projecting that if this does not end very quickly to go up, just streaking towards $100 a barrel, possibly as high as $130 a barrel. And when you get into $130 a barrel, guys, you go from, if you're averaging $2 a gallon, you go to averaging $5 a gallon for your gas. That's kind of how the math is on that. But it says commercial traffic has dropped 70% since Saturday, February 28th. Most vessels are executing U-turns, diverting or idling in the Gulf of Oman. Legal discrepancy. The UK Marine Trade Operations and European Union Naval Mission app sites have noted that while radio warnings are being broadcast, a formal legal blockade has not been declared under international law. In other words, it doesn't look like they've got ships out there doing much blocking. They would be setting ducks. And at one time, going back a few years ago, they mined the straits with underwater mines right near the surface there. We don't have any reports of that yet because Iran themselves are trying to get a little bit of oil out of there too because they need the money. And this is just coming in. It says at least 3 ships were attacked in or near the strait today on March the 1st as Iran retaliates for strikes on its mainland. The Skylight, a Palau-flagged oil tanker, was targeted north of Kasab, Oman. Its 20-person crew was evacuated after a fire broke out. The UK MTO reported 2 other vessels, the MKD Voim and Hercules Star, were struck by unknown projectiles, though fires were rapidly brought under control. There's major suspensions. Global carriers, including Maersk, guys, that's probably the largest, MSC, Hapag-Lloyd, and CMA, CGM have suspended all transits through the strait due to extreme security risk. Insurance collapse. Marine insurers have halted coverage for voyages in the area or increased war premiums by roughly 50%, making transit operationally unsustainable for most private actors. It's a big blockade, even though it's not physical, but simply because of the threat from the insurance companies. We talked about this yesterday. It looks like they've gone ahead and you either pay double or you get cut off right now. So there's a lot of ships more than likely setting at anchor, both in the Gulf of Oman and on the other side of the straits, that are in that situation. Now, as of today, Brent crude prices have surged 10% to approximately $80 a barrel. Analysts warn prices could reach $120 to $130 if the effective blockade persists, as the strait handles 20% of global oil and similar share of liquefied natural gas, LNG. They got pipelines, alternative routes such as the Saudi East-West pipeline, and the UAE's Fujairah pipeline can only divert about 1/5 of the usual volume that transits the strait. So even that's better than nothing, but it's not that much. Now, as far as exposure, Asia is the most vulnerable. 84% of oil passing through the strait is destined for Asian markets, with China alone importing over 5 million barrels per day through this route. While most shipping companies have suspended operations, a few vessels have attempted to transit or have been caught in the crossfire during the first 48 hours of this escalation. They're talking about the Stena Imperative, which is a U.S. flag vessel. I think this is the one that on the report. This tanker successfully evaded a capture attempted by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Omani territory. It says 3 pairs of Iranian speedboats surrounded the vessel and ordered it to stop, but the captain increased speed while a U.S. Navy warship intervened to escort it to safety. Now, it doesn't say much about that intervention, but I do remember our president saying night before last that he was going to annihilate the Navy. So, again, we're still in the fog of war here. Then the Skylight Palu flagged an oil tanker targeted and hit north of Oman. We talked about that. As of Sunday afternoon, the only oil tanker observed successfully passing through the strait was owned by Iran state-run National Iranian Tanker Company, more than likely China. Now, the only thing about that is, guys, is are we sure that there's oil in this tanker or any other Iranian tankers? Now, all of this goes back kind of to when we had the pandemic and prices were going crazy. The diesel trucks couldn't get diesel, prices of fertilizer, everything was going up. But the impacts on global oil prices, what they're saying is the immediate surge, the immediate problem. Brent crude prices jumped 10% today, again following the military escalations. Short-term analysts expect Brent to open the week at $90 or higher. That's in the morning. Worst case scenario, if the closure is prolonged, experts at J.P. Morgan and other firms warn prices could reach $130 to $140 a barrel now. Gas prices, U.S. national averages, previously near $2.80, are projected to spike towards $3 to $5 per gallon, depending on the duration of this disruption, guys. And so, what else are we dealing with? When you talk about the prices going up this much on fuel, everything that you put in your mouth, unless you grow it, comes by truck, or train or ship or something. And if it comes by ship, then it hits a train or a truck, right? Walmart or whoever it is. That price is passed on into your food price. Where else is it passed on to? Of course, your electric bill. It could start rising more than it already has, and it has really been jumping in the last few months. Incredible. But again, we're looking at wiping out a lot of gains that we were making as far as the price of oil. That was one of the things the administration were constantly bragging about, and I was glad of it. But think about what you use in a weekly fuel bill. And you think about that doubling or even more, going from $2.90 to $5 per gallon or higher very quickly. And will that create shortages? Now, as of today, this alternative pipeline infrastructure is being pushed to its maximum functional limit to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. While these routes offer a vital pressure valve, they can only handle 2.6 to 5.5 million barrels per day, a fraction of the 20 million barrels per day that usually transits the strait. Now, guys, that couple of things, think about there. Of course, Asia, 70, 80%, maybe higher. And it's not just China and Japan, Indonesia, those areas. But when oil is not an infinite commodity, and you wonder at what point do we start seeing these major oil-producing companies start to drain their wells dry? It's hard to say, guys, but a long time ago, the question was asked, how did the draining of the top layer oil fields affect the tectonic plates of our planet? And the major thing then was, they're not deep enough to hit that deeper oil. But it was admitted that it is a lubricating effect in the friction between the tectonic plates as one plate moves over the other, vice versa. And now they went past that point in drilling down to 20, 30,000 feet, say in the Gulf of America, different places like that. So now the world has kind of topped off that first layer, and now they're digging much deeper. Anyway, when that gets lower and lower, you're going to increase the chance of friction. Why is the oil here anyway? Guys, if you believe that much oil is fossil fuel, you're sadly mistaken. Guys, if we look at the strategic oil reserves of different companies, Japan, they're saying, is the most prepared. It says, one of the world's largest and most sophisticated reserves, a legacy of the 1970s oil shocks. They have about 236 million barrels in their storage. Current status, Japan has enough oil to last 230 days or 7 months without a single drop of new imports. The government has authorized a coordinated release to keep refineries running, though officials have expressed concern about the liquid natural gas, LNG, shortages for which they have much smaller reserves. And again, that's being blocked right there in the strait also. If we look at the other end of the spectrum, going from Japan to India, guys, it is in a more precarious position. It has the highest chance of being in trouble. It has a smaller reserve capacity and a high dependency on Middle East crude. It has roughly 38 million barrels distributed across 3 underground facilities, Vaspattam, Mangalore, and Pandur, if that's how you say it. Current status is these reserves could only cover 9.5 days of national demand. That's a lot different than 7 months, isn't it? India has moved to emergency alert status. The government is frantically negotiating for increased supply from Russia, Guyana to be delivered via the Cape of Good Hope, bypassing the Middle East entirely. Takes longer, will cost more, but it is possible. It just depends on how widespread all of this action becomes. They're saying South Korea has 96 million barrels, or about 100 days. Now, a global emergency trigger alert could be issued by the International Energy Agency, the IEA, based in Paris. It has the power to order a collective release of reserves from 31 member countries, including the U.S., Japan, and many European nations. And so they're going to try to hit that drain button just as quick as they can, because a lot of these international agencies are run by globalists that want to take down the world order as it stands. Now, it says that they have approximately 1.2 billion barrels, again, the IEA. It says, while large, a total IEA release, now they're talking about the U.S. and everybody else, could only compensate for a full Strait of Hormuz closure for 60 days. Now, so, again, crude oil prices are going to go up. They're going up as we speak. The futures are, and other things. And I looked this morning, and the stock market had closed down Friday over 500 points because they knew this was going on in other factors. And I hope this thing ends pretty quickly, because the economic risks are worldwide here. It says global recession, a sustained price above $100 a barrel, is described by energy advisors as a guaranteed global recession. Inflation surge, a 100% spike would likely trigger severe global inflation and force central banks to halt interest rate cuts. China's role as the primary buyer of Iranian oil, China would be forced to bid for substitute supplies on the global market, further driving up prices. It's going to be a rush to be supplied because the world is gluttonous for oil. Now let's look at the other implications. As of today, U.S. and European intelligence agencies have moved to high alert due to fears that Iran may activate sleeper cells in retaliation for the recent death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, in Austin, Texas last night, the place where I was born, there was a mass killing, and it was the guy they killed ended up killing him. He killed a bunch of people. I think 17 are wounded, but he had a Allah t-shirt on, and he had already had his passport cleared and all that, or he had become a naturalized citizen. But he came in it was like an open area restaurant, bar thing, and just started shooting up the crowd last night. But what they're talking about now is because the military of Iran is being decimated, that the sleeper cells will be activated because it's their last step. They don't have any other choices. Now, how does that affect us? Well, we saw the attack last night in Austin, but they're talking about hacking and shutting down our electrical grids, water supplies, things like that, because they're very good at what they do. And they can spray any site, even yours or mine, with 100,000 passwords at one time, and one will click, usually. It's called spraying. But again, yesterday the FBI was on high alert. Kash Patel had placed all domestic counterterrorism and intelligence teams on high alert to monitor and deter potential attacks, saying security experts warned that Iran's asymmetric response could involve long-established networks. And regardless of what they're saying, we're getting information from the FBI and all. Other security firms are reporting a lot more than just chatter. Again, they're gonna try to hit every bit of infrastructure through the internet they can, but no networks. Experts highlight the groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, and you can't forget the Houthis, have had a presence in the U.S. since the 1980s and could be used as catalysts for violence. We saw it in Austin last night. Target profiles. Potential targets include government officials, critical infrastructure, power grids, water systems, Jewish or Israeli institutions, and public gatherings. They left out Christian gatherings there, which are in danger as much as any of the other ones. Lone actors or intelligence agencies are also concerned about lone sympathizers, I guess, like in Austin, who may independently mobilize to violence in response to the conflict. The analysts also suggest that because Iran views this conflict as existential, in other words, it's their last move, they are more likely to use every tool in their arsenal, including global terror assets. Some experts believe cyber attacks on U.S. hospitals or utilities may be Iran's sole remaining instrument if their conventional military options are fully degraded. Again, it's going to be hard to degrade sleeper cell military options until they expose themselves, unless they're being watched. Now, in this epic fury, counteroffensive threat intelligence firms have detected the first signs of Iranian cyber counteroffensive today. State-sponsored activity, Iranian units such as Muddy Water, APT-42, and APT-33 were reportedly activated and retooling prior to the military strikes. They knew it was coming just like we did. They're saying it's a critical infrastructure risk. CISA and the FBI warned that Iranian actors frequently use brute force and password spraying, that's what I was talking about, to target healthcare, energy, and government sectors. Spray it with every known password, make up a few, it's probably all AI controlled, and somewhere the mud's going to stick to the wall. And they're also warning ordinary citizens like you and I, guys, about changing your passwords. Make sure you've got double authentication to get into something, two-step verification, whatever they call it. And all of that, change up your passwords, any kind of thing you got like that, even if it's a different network than Chrome or something like that, or you're using a proxy network, they still can be hacked. So they're saying clean up everything, because not only would they spray one area for passwords, but they could spray entire viruses into a system, a full system like Google or something. And what would that do? It would interrupt communication. That's one of the first casualties of any type of conflict. You stop people from being able to talk to each other, and it creates conflict and chaos. People wonder what's going on. You can't get your regular news, whatever. But they're definitely telling us now that these cells are moving. And they mention, some physical violence, but they really are focusing on the cyber attacks. So be careful of that. If you, in your emails, anything like that, you check that out. If you got a business, check all of that out. Check every security apparatus you have. Change every password you can. Change the two-step authentication also. Anyway, what I wanted to do, guys, we've got troops that were lost there already. There's Israeli citizens have been killed. Of course, there's a bunch of people in Iran have been killed, troops, and I'm sure there's some citizens that were in close proximity to some of the attacks. We don't know yet for sure, but I know 9 Israeli citizens were killed, and that we lost some troops. I don't know the exact number yet, but we'll get more information about it. They're not going to release any names until at least 48 hours after the families have been notified, and so that could be another day or so. We're watching this, guys. You watch it. Like I said, this was about the wider spread implications of what we're seeing. I'm all for the Iranian people getting freedom. It's going to be a hell of a price to pay for a lot of us if we're not careful, though. We're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.